The day started like any other. The Navy veteran had spent hours on duty earlier in the morning and finally had a few hours off. The sun was bright, the air smelled faintly of fresh coffee in the nearby bakery, and the parking lot was full, but manageable. He drove slowly, looking for an empty spot, scanning the rows of cars while listening to the soft hum of his car radio. It was supposed to be a normal, peaceful day, a day he could enjoy after all the stress and demands of his work. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a perfect parking spot. It was close to the entrance, shaded by a tree, and conveniently located. He began to maneuver his car into the space, signaling as he moved. At that exact moment, a car carrying a couple pulled in from the other side. They were older, with expressions on their faces that immediately made him uneasy. They waved their arms as if to claim the spot, and he could hear the tense tone in their voices even from inside his car. He tried to remain calm. Years of training had taught him to assess situations carefully, to react with discipline rather than impulsiveness. He kept his hands steady on the wheel and gave them a small, polite nod, hoping they would understand that he had already signaled for the spot and was ready to park. But the couple didn't back down. Instead, they got out of their car quickly, their movements sharp and aggressive. They stood in front of his car, blocking his path. "Hey, you can't park here," the man shouted. His voice carried anger, irritation, and something more sinister that made the Navy veteran tense. The woman beside him joined in, her voice high and cutting, demanding that he leave immediately. They used words that stung, racial insults that he had unfortunately encountered before but still never got used to. He could feel his jaw tighten, but he forced himself to breathe slowly and stay composed. He rolled down his window slightly. "I was already signaling for this spot," he said calmly. "I think we can find a way to resolve this without trouble." His tone was firm but neutral. He didn't want to escalate the situation, but he also refused to be intimidated. The couple didn't listen. The man stepped closer to his car, almost pressing against the door. He raised his voice, making a scene in the busy parking lot. A few bystanders paused, looking curiously from a distance. Some took out their phones, sensing potential drama. The woman began pacing around, her hands on her hips, muttering insults and laughing cruelly. The Navy veteran felt a rush of frustration, but reminded himself that losing control would only worsen things. He remembered all the lessons from his service: patience, observation, strategic thinking. He observed the couple carefully, noting their movements, their expressions, their body language. They were aggressive, but reckless. They underestimated him. He could see the arrogance in their posture. They believed that just by shouting and threatening, they could make him leave. He decided not to give them the satisfaction. "Sir, please step back," he said, his voice calm but with authority. "You're blocking traffic, and this could get dangerous." He kept his eyes steady on the man, showing that he was serious without being confrontational. He didn't move closer, didn't raise his hands, didn't try to intimidate. He simply stood there, waiting for them to make a rational choice. Instead, the couple grew bolder. The man tapped on the hood of his car, leaving dents while shouting even louder. The woman pointed at his vehicle and laughed, making rude gestures. Other shoppers began to watch. Some whispered to each other, shaking their heads in disbelief. The veteran noticed a few people stepping closer, phones raised, ready to record if the situation escalated further. It was a delicate moment. One wrong move could turn a tense counter into a physical confrontation. He took a deep breath and reminded himself of his training again. React with control. Stay calm. Document evidence if needed. Protect yourself without unnecessary violence. He slowly reached for his phone and began recording the couple's aggressive behavior, keeping the camera discreet so as not to provoke them further. Every insult, every threat, every aggressive movement was captured. This wasn't about revenge. It was about responsibility and accountability. The couple's anger seemed to increase with his restraint. They expected fear, submission, or retaliation, and they got neither. The man slammed his hands against the side of the car, denting the door further. The woman yelled, trying to provoke a reaction. The Navy veteran remained silent, letting them exhaust themselves. The air around them was tense, charged with aggression and disbelief. He noticed small details: the woman's tapping foot, the man's clenched fists, the slight tremor in their voices that suggested they were starting to realize he wasn't scared. A passerby, an older man who had been walking with groceries, called out, urging the couple to step aside. "Leave the man alone." "You're making a scene," he shouted. A few others nodded, some filming, some just watching in amazement. The couple shot back at the bystander, but their anger now seemed less directed at him and more at the situation. They were losing control, and it showed. Despite the rising tension, the Navy hero stayed composed. He had been trained to deal with high-pressure situations, and this was no different. The couple's aggression was temporary, fueled by ignorance and arrogance. He understood that acting impulsively would only make matters worse. Instead, he continued to keep the situation in view, making sure that if it escalated further, he had proof of their behavior. The man suddenly leaned closer to the car window, spitting and shouting hateful words. The Navy veteran ignored the spit, focused on staying calm. He locked the doors, keeping his vehicle secure. The woman tried to open the passenger door, but it was locked. She screamed, but he did not flinch. The couple's behavior was escalating, but he remained a model of discipline. Then, a small miracle happened. A security guard appeared from the shopping center, alerted by the commotion. The Navy hero gave a brief explanation of what had happened, while keeping an eye on the couple. The guard nodded and asked them to step back. The couple tried to lie, claiming the Navy veteran had been aggressive. But the bystanders, some recording on their phones, began to speak up, recounting what they had seen. The truth was visible to everyone who had eyes. The Navy veteran remained calm, patient, and confident that the situation would resolve without physical confrontation. He knew that his restraint and composure were not signs of weakness, but of strength. The couple, frustrated and humiliated by their inability to provoke him, finally retreated to their car. They drove off slowly, muttering threats and insults under their breath. But the Navy hero remained seated, composed, and unshaken. As he parked his car safely, he reflected on the encounter. It was a test of patience, discipline, and human decency. He had faced hate, aggression, and ignorance, yet he had handled it with integrity. The bystanders continued their conversations, shaking their heads at the couple's behavior, some sharing footage of the incident on social media. The Navy veteran knew that sometimes the real battle wasn't in physical strength, but in the ability to remain calm, document the truth, and let consequences unfold naturally. This incident, although tense and unpleasant, would soon prove that patience, discipline, and courage could turn even the most hostile encounter into a lesson of dignity and justice. He left the parking lot with a quiet satisfaction, knowing he had handled the situation with honor and calm intelligence, ready for whatever would come next. After the couple drove away, the Navy veteran sat in his car for a moment, letting the adrenaline settle. His heart was still beating a little faster than normal, but he felt proud of himself for remaining calm. He knew that situations like this could escalate in a matter of seconds if he reacted the wrong way. His training, both in the Navy and in life, had taught him patience and careful observation. He reminded himself that sometimes the best way to win was to stay composed. He took a few deep breaths and looked around the parking lot. People were still whispering and pointing toward the area where the confrontation had happened. Some were watching him curiously, some with admiration. He noticed a young woman showing him a thumbs up from her car window. He nodded politely, but didn't smile. This wasn't about recognition. It was about standing firm and doing the right thing. He remembered that this couple had acted out of ignorance and prejudice. They had assumed they could intimidate him because of the color of his skin. He had faced prejudice before, but every experience taught him that dignity and self-control mattered more than anger or retaliation. He resolved that he would not let their hate disturb his day. As he started his car again, he decided to drive slowly around the parking lot to find another spot closer to the entrance. His goal was simple: finish his errands without further confrontation. But the incident left him thinking about human behavior, about how people could let anger and ignorance take control, and about how courage often meant more than fighting back physically. Courage sometimes meant staying calm while chaos raged around you. He parked in a new spot, closer to the entrance, and stepped out of the car. The air felt fresh, and the noises of the shopping center surrounded him. Families were walking, children laughing, music playing from nearby stores. He felt a strange sense of peace. Life continued, even after moments of hate and conflict. He reminded himself that every day offered choices: how to react, how to treat others, and how to maintain one's integrity. Inside the shopping center, he walked slowly, letting himself absorb the surroundings. He noticed the kindness of small things: a store clerk smiling, a little child holding a parent's hand, the smell of freshly baked bread. These were the parts of life worth noticing. The moments that reminded him of why it was important to stay grounded despite negativity. As he moved through the stores, he noticed a few people giving him nods of respect. They had seen what happened in the parking lot, either directly or through recordings. He acknowledged them briefly, keeping his composure. He didn't seek validation. He simply appreciated that truth and fairness had caught the attention of others. The world had a way of noticing even small acts of restraint and courage. While shopping, he thought about the Navy and his years of service. Discipline, patience, and integrity were values instilled in him early on. He remembered the intense training, the long days, and the difficult challenges he had faced. Those experiences had prepared him not just for physical confrontations, but for life's unexpected trials. The encounter in the parking lot, though unpleasant, was a test of these very qualities. He had passed it with composure, and that gave him quiet satisfaction. He also thought about the couple. They had allowed their prejudice to guide their actions, believing it gave them power. But true power, he reflected, came from self-control and respect for others. The couple's aggression had been fueled by insecurity and ignorance, and in that, they had only shown weakness. He didn't feel anger toward them anymore. He felt pity. They had lost an opportunity to act with dignity, and in that loss, their true character had been revealed. As he continued his shopping, he noticed how technology had changed interactions like the one in the parking lot. Many people were filming, documenting moments, and sharing them on social media. In a way, it was a form of accountability. The Navy veteran understood this. He had documented the couple's aggression himself. It's not out of desire for revenge, but to ensure that truth could not be distorted. Documentation was a tool of justice. It's a modern form of evidence that could protect the innocent and reveal the truth. Walking past a coffee shop, he decided to take a short break. He ordered a cup of black coffee and found a quiet table. Sitting there, he reflected on the human tendency to act out of fear, ignorance, and anger. He thought about how small decisions like standing firm, walking away, or choosing kindness could shape outcomes in powerful ways. He had chosen restraint, and that choice had kept him safe and preserved his dignity. He also considered the role of bystanders. Those who had witnessed the incident in the parking lot had not all acted the same way. Some had stayed quiet, unsure of what to do. Others had spoken up, asking the couple to step back. Some had filmed the event. Each action, small or large, contributed to the way the incident would be remembered. He realized that courage wasn't limited to those directly involved. It could be shown by anyone willing to do the right thing. After finishing his coffee, he left the cafe and resumed his shopping. Each store visit was accompanied by a sense of calm reflection. He focused on the tasks at hand, picking up items he needed, interacting politely with clerks, and avoiding letting his mind dwell on the anger he had faced. The choice to focus on positive actions rather than negative events was deliberate. It was another way of exercising control over the situation, not allowing hate to dictate his day. While walking, he noticed a group of teenagers whispering and laughing nearby. He felt a moment of tension, but quickly reminded himself that not every glance or comment was meant to harm. His experience had taught him to assess situations carefully before reacting. Often, fear and anger could cloud judgment. Patience and observation, on the other hand, could reveal truth and prevent unnecessary conflict. He then made a quick stop at a local convenience store. As he entered, he noticed the couple's car outside, parked further down. He hadn't expected to see them again, but he didn't feel threatened. They were still there, but he was calm, knowing that he had acted responsibly and that any further aggression on their part would reflect poorly on them. He felt a quiet confidence, understanding that his calmness was stronger than their anger. Inside the store, he moved slowly, taking his time to select the items he needed. He noticed the clerk looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and respect. He smiled politely, not wanting to make the clerk uncomfortable but acknowledging the recognition. It was a reminder that integrity and composure were noticed, even if silently. After paying for his items, he left the store. Outside, the sunlight was warm, and the sounds of the parking lot felt familiar and unthreatening. He watched the couple as they got into their car. Their expressions were frustrated, and he realized they were likely replaying the incident in their minds. Angry that their attempts to intimidate him had failed, he felt no need for confrontation. The world had a way of balancing actions and consequences, and he trusted that in time their behavior would catch up with them. As he walked back to his car, he reflected on the importance of maintaining composure in all situations. He thought about how many conflicts could be resolved, avoided, or mitigated simply by staying calm, observing, and acting with integrity. The encounter in the parking lot had been a test of character, not just for him but for everyone who had witnessed it. He felt a sense of quiet pride, knowing he had passed that test without losing his dignity. Getting into his car, he started the engine and drove slowly through the lot, choosing a new route to exit. He felt at peace, ready to continue with his day, understanding that the lessons he had reinforced today were more valuable than any argument or confrontation. Patience, discipline, and courage in the face of provocation were the true markers of strength, and he had demonstrated all three with quiet confidence. After leaving the store, the Navy veteran walked slowly to his car, reflecting on the morning's events. The parking lot had started to calm down, but he could still feel the tension in the air. The couple's car was gone now, and for the moment peace had returned. But he knew that some situations didn't end when the immediate conflict disappeared. Their anger, fueled by ignorance and prejudice, could follow them. And sometimes, actions had consequences he couldn't see yet as he approached his car. He noticed a few bystanders still lingering nearby. Some were whispering to each other, others recording clips of the incident from earlier. He realized that the incident was already spreading through small pockets of observers. It was a reminder that even brief confrontations could have a lasting impact when handled with integrity and calm. He unlocked his car and settled inside. The engine roared softly, and he adjusted the mirrors before driving forward. Today was meant to be simple errands and a peaceful afternoon. Yet he found himself still processing the events in the parking lot. He considered how human behavior worked, how anger and prejudice could escalate quickly, and how courage and composure often prevented escalation. As he started to drive, he noticed the couple's car slowly re-entering the parking lot from the other side. Their faces were red with anger, their movements tense. He realized that they might be seeking confrontation again. He could feel a flicker of caution, but he reminded himself that fear had no place in measured responses. He was prepared for their next move, not with aggression, but with strategy. They began driving toward him, clearly intending to provoke another reaction. He slowed down and kept his distance, allowing them to follow the rules of the parking lot without direct engagement. Their car swerved slightly, signaling frustration and impatience. Pedestrians noticed the tension building and moved to safer spots. The Navy veteran remained calm, keeping his hands steady on the wheel and his focus clear. The couple tried shouting through their rolled-down windows, hurling insults that were hateful and aggressive. Their voices echoed across the parking lot, drawing attention from shoppers and employees. A few people stopped to watch, sensing that something was unfolding that required careful observation. Some recorded the event, capturing the escalating confrontation. But the Navy veteran ignored the provocation, refusing to engage verbally. He understood that responding would only give them satisfaction and could escalate into unnecessary danger. Instead, he focused on his surroundings. He noticed the shopping center's security cameras pointed directly at the area. He also noted the positions of bystanders, ensuring that no one was at risk. He calculated his next moves calmly, thinking several steps ahead. His experience in high-pressure environments had taught him to anticipate human behavior and remain in control, without resorting to violence. This was not a battle to win with strength. It was a test of patience, strategy, and discipline. As the couple's car moved closer, they tried to block his path. The Navy veteran carefully maneuvered around them, using the space available in the parking lot without creating a collision. Their anger grew more visible, but he remained composed. He realized that they had expected fear, submission, or retaliation, and that their disappointment was fueling their aggression. He understood that they were reckless, and that any reaction from him could be misinterpreted, so he chose restraint. The couple's behavior became increasingly erratic. The man honked aggressively, revving the engine while the woman shouted from the passenger seat. Their attempts to provoke him were obvious, and bystanders started murmuring about the escalating situation. Some approached to intervene or at least speak to the security personnel present. Their growing frustration was evident, but the Navy veteran's calmness contrasted sharply with their chaos. He began documenting their behavior once more, using his phone to record audio and video discreetly. He wanted to ensure that if their aggression continued or became dangerous, there would be undeniable evidence of their actions. His approach was deliberate, non-aggressive, and focused entirely on protecting himself and others around him. He knew that patience and documentation could prevent misunderstandings and ensure accountability. The couple's aggression didn't go unnoticed. Security guards from the shopping center had started to observe the situation more closely, approaching from different directions to be ready if the confrontation escalated. Other bystanders quietly moved to safer positions, some offering support to the Navy veteran, while others simply watched. Recognizing that restraint and patience were key, despite their continued attempts to provoke him, he maintained composure. He adjusted his seat, kept a steady grip on the steering wheel, and reminded himself to breathe evenly. He analyzed their actions carefully, noting signs of fatigue, impatience, and overconfidence. They were reckless and distracted, focusing entirely on trying to intimidate him. His strategic patience meant he could act decisively if necessary, but only in self-defense and only with careful control. The couple's shouting grew louder as they realized that their intimidation had failed. They tried to cut him off, maneuvering aggressively through the lot. Yet he moved predictably and calmly, using the space around him to avoid confrontation. Pedestrians stepped back, creating clear paths. He noticed a few people whispering among themselves, recognizing the couple's behavior as unreasonable. Some began filming, adding to the evidence of the situation. He continued to reflect internally on human nature. Anger often blinds people, and arrogance can make them reckless. Those who try to control others through fear or hate rarely understand true strength. He had been trained to face threats, not with impulsive reactions, but with strategy and observation. This was a real-life application of all the lessons he had learned. Patience, composure, and careful assessment of risks could prevent unnecessary harm while still standing firm against injustice. As the couple's actions grew more erratic, their car accidentally hit a small shopping cart left near the parking space. The sound of metal scraping against metal startled them, causing further frustration. They shouted at each other there, anger now directed inward, while he remained calm, observing quietly. He saw that their recklessness was starting to backfire, even without his intervention. The situation was beginning to turn in subtle ways, showing that uncontrolled anger can create its own consequences. At this point, more security personnel arrived, positioning themselves strategically. They instructed the couple to step away from the Navy veteran and to calm down. The couple tried to resist, claiming that the Navy veteran had been aggressive. But the evidence recorded by bystanders and on cameras made their claims weak. Bystanders began to speak up, recounting the incident accurately. The couple's sense of control was slipping. Despite the continued provocation, the Navy veteran stayed focused on remaining calm and avoiding unnecessary confrontation. His experience had taught him that real courage was not in reacting to anger, but in maintaining discipline and observing the consequences of others' actions. By keeping his composure, he created a situation where the couple's recklessness became more obvious to everyone. Finally, after several tense minutes, The couple's frustration peaked. They muttered threats, revved their engine, and sped off toward the parking lot exit. Their aggressive behavior had not succeeded in intimidating him, and the consequences of their own reckless driving were becoming apparent to all who watched. The Navy veteran remained in his car, breathing calmly, reflecting on the value of patience and measured responses. He had turned a potentially dangerous situation into a lesson in self-control, observation, and strategic restraint. As he prepared to leave the parking lot, he thought about the sequence of events and how quickly tensions could escalate. He realized that real strength was shown through composure and discipline, not aggression. The couple's actions had revealed their own flaws, while his calm and calculated responses had maintained safety and dignity. The situation was a reminder that courage often comes in quiet, measured forms, and that the right response can turn a potentially harmful encounter into an example of integrity and restraint. Driving toward the exit, he felt a sense of relief, but also awareness. While the immediate confrontation had ended, the lessons of patience, observation, and the power of calm actions would stay with him. He knew that life would continue to present challenges, some overt, some subtle. What mattered was the ability to face them with the same calm, steady, and thoughtful approach he had shown today. In that moment, he understood the true meaning of courage, and he knew it was a strength that could not be diminished by anger, hate, or ignorance. The couple sped away from the parking lot, their anger still boiling, but they were unaware that fate had a way of catching up quickly. Just 7 minutes later, their hurried drive brought them to the shopping center exit, where a malfunctioning gate waited as an unexpected obstacle. The gate, controlled by an electronic system, suddenly lowered, blocking their path. They slammed the brakes, jerking the car to a halt, panic flashing across their faces. The man leaned on the horn, frantically pressing buttons, hoping to lift the gate manually. The woman shouted, blaming him for everything, her voice filled with frustration and disbelief. Neither of them noticed the small dented cart lying to the side of the exit lane or the small puddle of water from a recent cleaning. Their attention was consumed entirely by their own agitation. They were so focused on their anger that they missed the subtle warnings around them. Nearby, a security guard noticed the couple struggle and moved closer, prepared to intervene if necessary. Cameras from the parking lot captured every moment of the unfolding scene. Their reckless behavior, which had been so apparent earlier in the parking lot, now led to an immediate consequence. The malfunctioning gate would not yield to force or frustration. The couple's aggression and impatience had brought them to a literal standstill. The man tried to force the gate open by pressing the release button repeatedly and pushing the car forward. The engine roared, and the tires spun slightly against the pavement, but the gate stayed firmly in place. Panic turned to desperation. As he realized their situation was worsening rather than improving, the woman shrieked, gesturing wildly, clearly regretting their earlier actions and blaming the Navy veteran in her mind for triggering the events that led them here. As they struggled, the car jolted slightly over the small puddle near the gate, causing a minor loss of control. The man overcorrected, hitting the side mirror on the gate's metal frame. Sharp sound echoed, and the side mirror hung awkwardly, damaged. The woman's frustration peaked, her voice rising even higher, but this only added to their mistakes. The gate, unyielding and mechanical, had become the symbol of the consequences of rash actions and unchecked aggression. The couple's panic drew the attention of bystanders outside the shopping center. People began to record their predicament on phones, recognizing the irony of the situation. Their prior aggression toward the Navy veteran was fresh in the minds of those who had witnessed it. The gate now stood as a silent witness to their reckless behavior, showing that impulsive actions rarely lead to the desired outcome. Inside the car, the man's breathing was heavy, the woman's shouts continued, and both of them were now consumed by fear and embarrassment. They had underestimated the world around them, thinking that their anger and prejudice could intimidate anyone without consequence. Life had intervened in a quiet but firm way, showing that their lack of composure had consequences beyond their initial aggression. The Navy veteran, meanwhile, was unaware of the couple's predicament. He had completed his errands calmly, his focus on completing his day with dignity rather than confrontation. Yet by chance, his path would soon intersect with the consequences of the couple's recklessness. The recordings taken by bystanders, the security footage, and the natural order of events all aligned to reveal the truth of what had happened minutes earlier. Back at the gate, the man attempted to drive over the small puddle one more time. But the car's tires slipped slightly, causing minor damage to the vehicle's undercarriage. Sparks flew briefly as the car scraped against the metal gate. The woman screamed, realizing that their attempts to control situations through aggression had led to immediate, tangible damage. Their arrogance had blinded them to reality. And now reality had struck. The security guard stepped forward cautiously, gesturing for them to remain calm. "Sir, please turn off the car and step out slowly," he said firmly. The man hesitated, muttering about malfunctions and blaming the Navy veteran internally. The woman continued to shout, her tone oscillating between fear, frustration, and disbelief. The couple's earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by panic and confusion. As the guard observed, other employees arrived to assist. They assessed the gate and realized that a manual override was necessary. While they worked, the couple continued to argue, their voices carrying over the parking lot. The bystanders who had been watching earlier began whispering and pointing, recognizing the poetic justice unfolding. The viral videos that had begun circulating captured the couple's panic, humiliation, and the irony of the situation. The narrative was clear: actions driven by anger. Hate often result in their own consequences. The man tried one last attempt to lift the gate manually, pressing buttons and pushing the car, but the mechanism remained firm. The woman, now exhausted from shouting, leaned back, her face pale and frustrated. Both realized they were trapped in a situation they had created through their own recklessness and impatience. In that moment, they faced the natural repercussions of their behavior. A stark contrast to the Navy veteran's composed and measured response just minutes earlier. The security personnel finally managed to open the gate manually. The couple's car slowly moved forward, but not without leaving visible damage behind. The dented side mirror, the scraped undercarriage, and the scuffed tires were evidence of the consequences of their actions. They sped away as quickly as possible, their faces a mixture of anger, embarrassment, and disbelief. The bystanders, some recording, some watching silently, witnessed the immediate results of their impulsiveness, even as the couple disappeared from sight. The recordings and security footage ensured that their behavior earlier in the parking lot would not go unnoticed. Social media users who had captured portions of the confrontation began sharing videos, highlighting the irony of the couple's predicament. Comments poured in from people who had witnessed the incident, many emphasizing the lessons of restraint, patience, and the consequences of hate-fueled actions. Meanwhile, the Navy veteran continued his day peacefully, unaware of the exact details of the couple's misfortune. Yet, in a broader sense, he was indirectly connected to the outcome. His calm, composed behavior had contrasted sharply with the couple's reckless aggression, highlighting the contrast between measured response and impulsive action. The universe, in a subtle and timely way, had delivered justice without his intervention, emphasizing that patience, integrity, and restraint often produce their own rewards. He reflected on the lessons that could be learned from the incident. Human behavior, when guided by anger and prejudice, often leads to self-inflicted consequences. People who attempt to control or intimidate others without justification often find themselves facing unexpected outcomes. On the other hand, disciplined and thoughtful behavior can prevent escalation and maintain dignity. Even in the face of aggression, the couple's day, which began with attempts to intimidate and provoke, had ended with immediate consequences that were both public and visible. Their car bore the marks of their recklessness, and their pride had been publicly wounded. The irony of the situation was evident to anyone who observed or recorded it. Meanwhile, the Navy veteran continued his life with the quiet satisfaction of knowing that integrity, patience, and composure had prevailed. He thought about the bystanders, many of whom had witnessed the couple's behavior and the unfolding consequences. Their reactions ranged from amusement to admiration for the Navy veteran's restraint. Some commented on social media, emphasizing the lesson that anger and prejudice often lead to self-inflicted setbacks. The couple's behavior had inadvertently provided a teaching moment for everyone who had observed, recorded, or shared the incident. As he drove home later, the Navy veteran considered how small choices in the face of hostility could have significant effects. Choosing calm over aggression, observation over reaction, and integrity over provocation could prevent unnecessary harm and ensure that consequences fell where they were deserved. The events of the day reinforced the importance of discipline, patience, and measured responses. In the end, the couple's actions had led them to immediate consequences, while his composure had ensured safety, dignity, and clarity. The incident became a vivid example of karma in motion, illustrating that life often corrects imbalance in subtle, timely ways. The contrast between reckless aggression and thoughtful restraint highlighted the power of patience and strategic calm. The Navy Veterans Day ended peacefully, with errands completed and reflections on human behavior providing deeper insight. He understood that courage is often measured not by aggression, but by restraint. Not by provoking consequences, but by allowing natural outcomes to unfold. The couple's misfortune was a reminder that impatience and hate rarely lead to the desired results. While integrity and calm create their own form of justice, the Navy veteran finally returned to his car. After completing his errands, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment, the events of the day, which had begun with tension and aggression, had ended peacefully for him. He reflected on how different choices lead to different outcomes, and how remaining calm in the face of provocation could have a powerful impact. His day, once disrupted by hate and ignorance, had returned to normal, not because the situation had disappeared, but because he had maintained his composure throughout. He started the engine and slowly drove through the parking lot. Observing the remaining shoppers and bystanders, some were still discussing the couple's misfortune and the earlier confrontation. The videos that had begun circulating online were being shared widely, and the Navy veteran recognized that his decision to remain calm and document events had ensured that the truth was clear. People were seeing how restraint and patience could lead to a more positive outcome than aggression or retaliation. As he drove out of the shopping center, he thought about the couple and the choices they had made. Their behavior had been fueled by prejudice, arrogance, and impatience. They had attempted to intimidate him, only to find that their actions had unintended consequences. The malfunctioning gate and the resulting damage to their car were immediate reminders that impulsive actions often lead to self-inflicted harm. Life, he realized, had a way of teaching lessons that anger and hate never could. The Navy veteran reflected on the larger picture. Human behavior is often shaped by choices, and every action carries potential consequences. When people act out of fear, anger, or prejudice, they risk creating situations they cannot control. When people act with patience, integrity, and calm, they create outcomes that protect themselves and others. Today had been a clear example of this principle in action. He parked his car at home and took a moment to breathe deeply, feeling the tension from earlier finally leave his body. The calmness he maintained had allowed him to observe, understand, and respond appropriately without escalating the situation. He had demonstrated that true strength comes not from physical force or aggression, but from self-control and thoughtful action. The contrast between his behavior and that of the couple had never been clearer. Over the next few days, he noticed the story spreading further. Clips of the incident, showing both the parking lot confrontation and the couple's struggle with the gate, were shared widely on social media. People commented on the Navy veteran's composure and the irony of the couple's misfortune. Many emphasized the lessons about patience, integrity, and the natural consequences of reckless behavior. The narrative resonated with people, illustrating how calmness and discipline can triumph over aggression and hate. He thought about the bystanders who had witnessed the events. Some had been passive observers, while others had taken small actions, speaking up or recording the incident. Every action contributed to the way the situation was resolved. The Navy veteran realized that courage and integrity are not limited to those directly involved, but can be expressed by anyone willing to do the right thing. Observing, documenting, supporting fairness are powerful forms of strength. Reflecting on his own life, he considered how his Navy training had prepared him for moments like these. Discipline, patience, and the ability to assess situations carefully had been ingrained in him through years of service. Yet, this was a civilian situation, and the principles were the same. True courage and strength are universal, applying to everyday challenges as much as to extraordinary circumstances. He also thought about forgiveness and empathy. The couple had acted out of ignorance and prejudice, and while their actions had consequences, he felt no personal anger toward them. Hatred and revenge would have only escalated the situation and disturbed his peace. By maintaining composure, he had protected himself and allowed natural justice to take its course. He understood that anger and hate only perpetuate negativity, while patience, understanding, and restraint create positive outcomes. The Navy veteran continued to reflect on the lessons for society as a whole. Confrontations driven by prejudice, aggression, and fear often escalate unnecessarily, causing harm to everyone involved. By contrast, calm, strategic, and disciplined behavior can prevent harm, preserve dignity, and ensure that truth and fairness are upheld. The events of the day were a microcosm of this principle. A small but powerful illustration of human behavior and natural consequences. He felt gratitude for the bystanders, who had shown support or simply observed responsibly. Their presence and attention had helped ensure that the situation was resolved appropriately. Social awareness, even in small ways, contributes to collective accountability. He realized that society functions best when individuals act with integrity, respect, and patience, even in tense or challenging circumstances. Looking back, he saw that the couple's actions had highlighted the contrast between reckless aggression and measured calm. Their attempts to intimidate had failed, and the consequences they faced were immediate and visible. In contrast, his deliberate restraint and documentation had ensured safety and preserved dignity. The story, he realized, was a lesson not only for him, but for anyone who might encounter similar situations. He decided to share his reflections with friends and family, not focusing on the conflict itself, but on the principles that had guided his response. He spoke about patience, integrity, calmness, and the importance of observing situations carefully before acting. He emphasized that courage often manifests as restraint, that true strength is not always visible, and that allowing natural consequences to unfold can be more powerful than seeking immediate revenge or retaliation in the days that followed. He continued his routine with a renewed sense of awareness. He approached each task with calm focus, recognizing that every interaction offered an opportunity to practice patience and integrity. He felt more confident in his ability to handle unexpected challenges, knowing that maintaining composure and observing carefully were his most effective tools. He also thought about the broader impact of the story. Others who had witnessed or recorded the events had learned lessons about restraint, the dangers of prejudice, and the power of patience. The story spread as an example of human behavior, emphasizing the importance of discipline and calm in everyday life. People were inspired by his actions, recognizing that small, thoughtful choices can lead to meaningful outcomes. The Navy veteran understood that life would continue to present challenges, some visible and immediate, others subtle and long-term. Yet he felt prepared to meet them with the same principles he had applied during the parking lot incident. Composure, observation, patience, and integrity were tools that could guide him through both small conflicts and larger challenges. Ultimately, the day concluded with a sense of closure and clarity. The Navy veteran had faced aggression and prejudice, handled it with dignity, and allowed natural consequences to take their course. The couple had experienced immediate karma, and the public had witnessed the contrast between recklessness and restraint. The events reinforced the timeless lesson that true courage and strength are measured by one's ability to remain calm, act thoughtfully, and uphold integrity. Even when provoked, he returned home, reflecting on the lessons of the day. Life had a way of testing patience and character, and he had passed that test through careful observation, calm composure, and disciplined action. The story of the parking lot incident, the couple's recklessness, and the unfolding consequences was more than just a tale of conflict. It was a lesson in human behavior, integrity, and the enduring value of patience and restraint. In the quiet of his home, he felt a deep sense of peace. The events of the day had reinforced principles he had long valued, that calmness in the face of provocation preserves dignity, that strategic patience is more powerful than reactive aggression, and that integrity ensures fairness and justice. He knew that these lessons were not only applicable to extraordinary situations, but to everyday life. In moments big and small, as night fell, he reflected on how small actions and decisions could ripple outward, affecting others in ways that were both visible and subtle. By choosing restraint over retaliation, calm over aggression, and integrity over provocation, he had ensured a positive outcome. The couple's recklessness had served as a reminder of what happens when people act impulsively and without respect. Life, in its quiet and sometimes ironic way, had balanced the scales. He went to bed with a sense of satisfaction, not from triumph over others, but from knowing he had acted rightly. The story of the day would stay with him, a reminder of the power of patience, composure, and integrity. In facing aggression and prejudice, he had not only protected himself, but also demonstrated a model of behavior that could inspire others. The lessons were clear, timeless, and deeply human, emphasizing that courage is as much about restraint as it is about action, and that dignity is preserved through thoughtful choices.